Hello, this is Doug Richards with Glacial Lake Organics LLC. We are dealers for Dakota Rev. Wherever you farm and whatever you grow, we can help you grow it better with Dakota Rev. Our website is www.revuporganics.com. Feel free to give us a call, check out our website. We're happy to visit at any time.
And welcome to the Alpha Ag Summit. We want to thank you all for attending on whatever platform you are streaming this program on. I'm Kyle Hill, Farm Director at KRES in Moberly, Missouri, in the north central part of the Show Me State. I'm also with the guys over at 580 WIBW in Topeka, Kansas, and the Kansas Ag Network. 2020 saw some significant developments in the ongoing fight against weeds, but from a research and policy standpoint as well. How could these developments impact what farmers will face this coming season and what's in the works for 2021? We'll explore these and other issues surrounding herbicide use today with weed management experts from two of the Midwest's top land-grant universities. Our panel discussion is brought to you by Stein Seed, Stein Has Yield, and Glacial Lake Organics, Organic Carbon Redefined. Be sure and click on their logo on the sponsors page for more information about our sponsors. Let's now introduce our panelists on today's program. Dr. Kevin Bradley is a professor and state extension weed scientist in the Division of Plant Sciences at the University of Missouri. Dr. Bradley's faculty appointment includes extension and research responsibilities in the area of applied weed management in corn, soybean, wheat, pastures, and forages. He also teaches a graduate level class in herbicide mechanism of action and has served as major advisor to 27 graduate or postgraduate students since his arrival at Mizzou in 2003. By far, the largest percentage of Dr. Bradley's research and extension efforts are directed towards the development of strategies for the management and mitigation of herbicide-resistant weed biotypes. Dr. Bradley, glad to have you here today.
Thanks, Kyle. Glad to be here.
And also on our panel today, Dr. Sarah Lancaster. She began as an assistant professor and extension specialist in the Kansas State University Department of Agronomy in November 2019. Dr. Lancaster's efforts are focused on weed management extension and research. Sarah was raised on an integrated crop and livestock farm in East Central Missouri. She holds degrees from Mizzou as well as North Carolina State University and Texas A&M University. Sarah and her husband, Philip, have two children, Levi, who is 8, and Caleb, who is 6. So, Dr. Lancaster, glad to have you on our panel today.
Thanks, Kyle. Happy to be here.
Now, thank you. Now, before we begin, we remind everyone that the views and opinions expressed on this summit are not those of Alpha Media and do not represent the viewpoints of Alpha Ag Network stations, their farm directors, or management. This broadcast is protected by copyright law, and credit should be given whenever sharing or reposting this video. Now, advanced apologies for this and any of the other puns that might get thrown in here during our session here, but we're going to jump straight into the weeds and discuss the weed pressures that we've been seeing over the past few years. And Dr. Lancaster, we'll actually start with you on this question. What new pressures have you been noticing in your state?
So the top weeds that we see, no surprise, Palmer Amaranth in the eastern part of the state, which, or throughout the state really, kochia is very problematic, and mare's tail is something that is problematic. We are starting to see some concerns with things that maybe we thought we had a little better control on, things like velvet leaf. There have been some questions on, but really far and away, the ones we get the most calls on statewide are the pigweeds, and in particular here in Kansas, it's Palmer Amaranth.
Dr. Bradley, what are we seeing in Missouri?
A little bit different just from the standpoint of the pigweed species that we have the most problem with. Ours is water hemp. We do have Palmer, but not as much as Kansas. And yeah, I mean, Palmer gets a lot of attention, and it certainly has spread to other areas in the state that it traditionally wasn't, but water hemp is still our number one most problematic weed. And I would agree with Sarah. I mean, mare's tail is predominant. That would probably be our 2 or 3. some of the ragweeds, you know, kind of fall down the list there. We don't have kochia, thankfully, so we'll keep that away from here. But water hemp and palmer and mare's tail certainly are the top of our list.
Now, with that, we'll go ahead and jump straight into the big topic of discussion, perhaps among others in the industry. That would be the re-registration of several formulations of dicamba in this past fall, specifically registrations for Ingenia and Extendamax renewed until December of 2025. Tavium's registration was extended also to the end of 2025. A fourth product that was commercially available, Fexapan, my understanding is that is still working through the regulatory process. Dr. Bradley, starting with you, what can you tell us about these new registrations as well as new conditions that farmers will need to follow?
Well, I mean, you know, a few, I would call them minor things compared to what we've had in previous years. As far as new requirements, the buffer distance was increased to 240 feet, I believe it is. The soybean cutoff date is June 30th or R1. You might have, Missouri doesn't have any additional restrictions, but some states are, I guess, still considering additional restrictions other than what the federal label says. And probably the biggest one is the requirement of a pH buffering or volatility reducing agent. You might hear some new acronyms being thrown around about VRAs. And, you know, that's, it is the biggest, I guess, new requirement, and also one that I don't think too many universities have a whole lot of info on as far as what the trade names are, what the products are. There's a few that we know of, but there will be listed on these websites, like what has happened in the past with approved tank mix partners and all of that. There will be websites that have what you can use as a pH buffering or volatility reducing agent. So just off the top of my head, that's what comes to mind for me as far as anything growers might need to think about that's new with these products.
Dr. Lancaster, what are we hearing from Kansas in terms of what could be different with dicamba this year?
You know, those same big things, right? That increase in the buffer distance, the requirement for the VRA. I've checked the Extendamax website a few times here this month, and every time I've checked, there have been new products added. So I just want to emphasize for guys and gals that it's important to check that website timely before you go out and make your applications or purchase your products. A couple of other things. One minor change, they changed the rain-free period that they want after the application. They brought that in. It was 48 hours and now it's 24 hours. And the other thing that has come up in some conversations here in Kansas is the addition of the option to use what they're calling volatility reduction technologies. So that acronym, in case we need more in the alphabet soup, that acronym is VRT. And basically that's a hooded sprayer. So that may fit in some operations, it may not fit in other operations, but that option is out there, and you will see those products or those technologies on those websites.
And we'll go to you, Dr. Lancaster, stick with you for this, with this new acronym coming out, Volatility Reducing Technology, VRT, VRA. What are some other examples of VRTs that could be put to use this spring that farmers need to keep an eye out for?
You know, as far as things that are going to be label requirements, that those hooded sprayers and checking that list is the big one. But, you know, there are lots of things as far as application practices and application technologies that guys need to be mindful of. You know, nothing really new there. Things like minding your speed and minding your boom height, all of those, and using the proper nozzles, of course, that is another sort of moving target that folks need to check the website to make sure they're using currently available technology for.
Dr. Bradley, same question to you. Any VRTs that you might be looking into in terms of research this spring?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think part of the, it seems like we're reliving some of our past on some of this. Part of the frustration is that I've only seen one university study that actually has evaluated a volatility reducing agent with Ingenia. It was out of University of Tennessee, Tom Mueller and Larry Steckel. They did great work, but I think first thing they'll tell you is it was a study done in a humidome and not in a field setting. So bottom line is we don't have any data as a bunch of universities. I don't think not very many of us knew this was coming, but I think numerous universities are going to be doing some work on what the volatility reducing agents actually do, if they do reduce volatility, and I hope they do. And Dr. Mueller and Dr. Steckel's initial data in humidome says it does. But so, yeah, we're going to be doing a little bit with that next year. And I think there's plenty of other people that'll be doing even more than we are. But just to make sure that we're actually putting on a product that does something. Now we did have a study last year where we were able to look at volatility, but we did apply 3 different of these products and looked at what they do to pH and whether they influence weed control. And we didn't see any problem with weed control at all. None of them influence weed control. But as Sarah already said, there's so many. I mean, it's hard to know. There's no way we're going to be able to evaluate every single one, and it's hard to know what they're going to do. But we'll just see how it moves forward. But that is part of our plans for 2021. Yep.
Dr. Lancaster, turning our attention back to you, as some of your research has pertained to more off-target movement. That was a major concern when dicamba was making its way onto the market and application, was drift concerns and volatility. Can you give us a synopsis of what you've seen in your research with respect to OTM?
Sure. And this research has been done in a lot of different, or this type of research, I should say, has been done in a lot of different places, including Missouri with Kevin's group. A couple of the unique twists that actually this research was started by my predecessor, Dallas Peterson. A couple of the unique twists that Dallas put into these 2 projects that I'll briefly mention here. One, he was looking at the impacts of multiple drift events. A lot of the early drift work was done just considering the timing of a single drift event. So one of the students here, Tyler Myers, did some work looking at drift events that occur at V3, at R1, and at R3. And really, not a huge surprise here, but the more drift events you have, the more significant the impact. But really, any of the combinations of drift events that included injury at that R1 timing, that early reproductive phase, so that lines up with the application cutoff for XtendiMax and the other dicamba-containing products in soybeans. But anything that had that simulated drift at that R1 growth stage had some substantial yield reductions. The other thing that Tyler did that was a little less common is looking at variety responses. And in some parameters, there were, were variety responses, but across the board, again, any treatment that included that simulated drift at the R1 growth stage reduced yield relative to the non-treated control. So there's definitely a timing factor in terms of when that injury occurs. And so that can be helpful to folks as they, consider their options if off-target movement does negatively impact them.
Now, turning our attention, keeping focus that is on off-target movement, Dr. Lancaster, do you believe that these new rules, the new provisions put in place by EPA, have they sufficiently addressed any concerns about OTM, or is there anything that state ag departments need to consider with respect to further minimizing any potential damage from drift?
Wow, that's $1 million question, Kyle. They're not going to hurt anything, but it remains to be seen how much they're actually going to help. You know, Kevin kind of alluded to this, talking about the fact that very few university weed scientists have actually seen these products in the field. And so we don't have data to make a reasonable prediction on what we think is going to happen there. So all I will say is that they can't hurt anything. I'm not willing to go online as saying, or on the record as saying that they're going to fix it.
Dr. Bradley, how about you? You is there got a chance to go out on a limb on this? Or are you pretty much in the?
Yeah, the difference between me and Sarah is I'm old and have gray hair and a full professor, so I can say that. I think she said it really well, actually. From everything we've seen, these guidelines are certainly not going to hurt. We don't know if they're going to help, but you know, there's been frustration and tension between, you know, certain university scientists, and I would probably be one of the ones on the top of the list, and some companies that make these, the registrants, because we don't feel like you know, all of our concerns are being addressed sometimes. But I think again, she said it really well. I mean, there's nothing new here that is going to hurt or make things worse. I'm not sure there's anything new here that's really going to make it a whole lot better. You have these products that have some inherent volatility in them, and that's a really hard thing to solve. We keep on trying to solve it with these different additions. You know, at first it was vapor grip, and now it's VRAs and things like that. And I think, you know, hopefully that we are taking steps where we're making it better and better and better. But at the end of the day, a lot of our research has shown inversions are common. You can't do much about it. And if you have an inherently volatile product that's even a small degree of volatility, then it's hard to prevent that. So we'll just have to see what happens this year with these VRAs.
Now, one part of the new rules requires the establishment of buffers between fields where dicamba will be used. As you mentioned, Dr. Bradley, it's being extended to 240 feet. I think in some areas it's as much as 310 feet. What can we tell farmers right now about what they need to consider when establishing and even maintaining these buffers?
Well, I mean, I don't have a whole lot new to say here either, to be honest with you, Kyle. I mean, the buffer is different in that it's bigger, but we were supposed to have been used to buffers in agriculture for the past couple of years because we've had buffers. Now, having said that, I haven't seen a whole lot of buffers out there in the fields that I walk in, but part of that is just because they've manipulated their field to make it work in a situation that's next to it. You know, like there's more extend trait around them. But, you know, all I can say is, you know, the label is the law. You have to read that. It is a bigger buffer. Buffers make us nervous as weed scientists from the standpoint of it's a potential area for more weed seed and more resistance to occur. So it's kind of a double-edged sword in that respect. But I think mostly what I've seen is farmers managing it by being very careful about where they're placing their extend trait.
Dr. Lancaster, same question. Anything that farmers need to consider when establishing and maintaining these buffers?
You know, I think Kevin hit the nail on the head. The label has a long list of things that can be included within that buffer area. So farmers can manipulate that area so that it doesn't include much or any of their actual production field. So, you know, taking advantage of that is going to be important. Kyle, you hinted at the 310-foot buffer in some instances. You know, guys have an obligation to check the endangered species listing website to make sure if they fall in a county or if they farm in a county that falls under those additional guidelines. So just being aware of where you are and what the expectations that are unique to your location are is going to be important.
This is the herbicide panel of our Alpha Ag Summit. We're featuring Dr. Kevin Bradley, Extension weed scientist with the University of Missouri, and Dr. Sarah Lancaster, Extension specialist also with weed management at Kansas State University. This panel is being sponsored by Stein Seed and Glacial Lake Organics. We're now going to bring up other modes of action that farmers are turning to. We'll start this part by talking about glyphosate and its most commonly known commercial brand, Liberty Link, starting with the product itself in terms of any new developments or research concerning it. Dr. Bradley, we'll just open the floor to you about anything related to glyphosate.
Well, unfortunately, there are new developments and they're not good. This is not in my geography or Sarah's that I know of, but she can comment on that. But Arkansas recently reported glufosinate resistance in Palmer Amaranth, which I think is not big surprise to a lot of people, but also disheartening to say the least. You know, we still are using it successfully for the most part in at least Missouri for water hemp. We have been for the past 2 years collecting populations and just making sure we can still kill it. No research that we have done has identified any resistance in water hemp so far, but that doesn't mean it's not out there. It just means we haven't found it. But obviously that's a big concern. I still think, you know, for example, in the Enlist system with a glufosinate plus a 2,4-D, you're applying 2 modes of action that are effective post-emergence. But even if you're not in the Enlist system, we still have a lot of acres that are Liberty Link. You know, it takes proper management, but I think this should be a warning shot to everybody, you know, to be thinking about what has happened in Arkansas. Unfortunately, what often happens is my colleagues in Arkansas or Tennessee find something, and then 1 or 2 years later, then we start seeing the same thing. So I hope that doesn't occur this time for sure.
Dr. Lancaster, anything new you can add about glyphosate and any related research or developments?
So just a couple of things come to mind as I listen to Kevin's comments there. First, we do have a fair number of growers here in Kansas that really like that Liberty Link system. And so they're excited about the Extend Flex traits coming out this year. Their plan, according to some of my off-the-record conversations, is to treat it like a Liberty Link system and just use the dicamba resistance as kind of insurance against some of that off-target movement. That does have implications for resistance management, though, as Kevin kind of alluded to, talking about the Enlist system and mixing the Liberty and having both the Liberty and the 2,4-D available. With regard to the findings out of Arkansas, one of my colleagues has been screening Palmer Amaranth populations from across the state of Kansas. He has identified some here in Kansas that show what he's calling reduced sensitivity to Liberty, not full out confirmed resistance, but some reduced sensitivity. On the other hand, we have a population that we've been looking at pretty closely here on campus that is resistant to 6 different modes of action. A lot of those mechanisms of resistance are metabolic resistance, but that population is still susceptible to Liberty, and Liberty controlled it completely. So it's important to know, not only the general characteristics of the weed species that you're dealing with on your farm, but to know that resistance profile and to pay attention to what's going on toward the end of the season to know if you need to suspect those reduced sensitivities or resistance in your field.
Now, it's my understanding that the resistant pigweed that was found was actually in a county that borders both the Missouri Boot Heel and Tennessee. That was Mississippi County, Arkansas. Now, with this resistant variety discovered, Dr. Bradley, what's the next step to determine how to prevent its spread or potentially identify another one of its weak spots?
Well, we haven't had too much luck at preventing spread in pigweeds, mainly because it can be transmitted through the pollen. And So it's obviously concerning. I remember a long time ago, back I think it was 2003 or 2004, when I was first called to the first official glyphosate resistant water hemp field that we did research on for many years. And it was on the river, and across the river was Kansas. And I was talking to Sarah's predecessor about it, Dallas Peterson, and his eyes got big as you will ever have seen, because what he knew is that you can't really stop that pollen. I mean, you can in one sense. If you don't have any pigweeds in your field that are there, that are flowering and that are receptive to the pollen, then that's the way you stop it. And but we just haven't had too much success in the past at doing that. It spreads for miles. So as far as physical transfer of seed, we're not, I guess, as worried about that. It can occur, but certainly I would hope that the Arkansas researchers and whoever the farmer is are being pretty vigilant about keeping that stuff from going to seed in the future. So we'll just have to see how it all plays out.
Dr. Lancaster, anything to add about determining how to minimize its spread from going further?
I think Kevin kind of alluded to this, and it's keeping those those pigweeds in your field from setting seed or from reaching that reproductive stage. So again, paying attention to what's going on in your fields towards the end of the growing season and knowing what's out there, because if it's out there, it has the potential to, as Kevin said, take in that pollen that carries the resistance trait and then produce seed that will turn into plants that carry that resistance trait. So that late season scouting becomes super important as we think about herbicide resistance management.
Now, another product that's gaining traction in the farmer's arsenal is 2,4-dichlorophenoxyacetic, or simply 2,4-D, and its best known commercial brand, Enlist. As before, Dr. Lancaster, will actually start with you this time. Any latest developments and research we can report on the use of 2,4-D?
Super recent research developments, nothing super exciting. One of the things we've been kind of looking at here, and some other folks have been looking at, is just concerns with mixing in the 2,4-D system, as far as, especially when you look at combinations with some of the Roundup formulations, making sure that you are getting products mixed well. And then also just looking at the impact of some of those tank mixes on weed control in terms of reduced efficacy or antagonism. That is a possibility with this system.
Dr. Bradley, same question.
Yeah, I think, what I get asked about by growers often is about the difference in volatility and things like that. And so our own work and many other people way more smarter than me that have done stuff, that it's shown that these products are less volatile, and not completely, but less volatile. And obviously, as probably everybody knows that is listening, I mean, soybeans are nowhere close to as sensitive to 2,4-D as they are to dicamba. So that's a huge difference in kind of traditional corn and soybean country. So Enlist, as far as off-target movement, doesn't have as much baggage as what we see out of the Extend trait. But you move down to the southeast and get into cotton country, and that's a whole different thing, because 2,4-D is way more injurious to cotton. But our results have shown it's less volatile for sure, but anything can physically drift. We had a student come through here years ago that looked at the sensitivity of different tree and ornamental species to either 2,4-D and dicamba. And there's plenty of tree species and ornamentals and specialty crops that are as sensitive, if not more sensitive, to 2,4-D than dicamba. So I don't think we should forget about this whole part of it. Just because we say it might have, less issues in soybean doesn't mean you can't have problems with other stuff around, like grapes and peaches and all kinds of things like that. But from everything else, like, Sarah is right on with, what she was saying. And, I already mentioned it, but, we can't do a Liberty plus dicamba in the Extend system yet. It's not legal, and it's more volatile if you do that. So it's not allowed. We can do a Liberty plus 2,4-D in the Enlist system. It is legal. It is allowed. It's a good mix, and it's 2 effective modes of action going out at once. So that's why a lot of us tend to like anytime we can do 2 effective modes of action. It's a good thing.
Now, we do want to remind farmers that with all the products we're talking about, as well as the other staples currently available to them, glyphosate, atrazine, so on, we, of course, want to stress the need to have that proper training, the licensing, applicator licensing, that sort of thing, and following the label. So whichever one of you wants to start to talk about efforts to make sure that farmers follow that, go for it.
You can take the first crack, Kevin.
Well, I mean, yeah, I don't know what else to say other than the dicamba traits require specific training. We at the University of Missouri offered it for a few years. We do not offer it this year. It seemed, and the reason for that is fairly simple. Money, how much it costs to redo it every year. We can't afford to do it because we're not getting anything to do it. And just the fact that it looks like this is going to be here for the long run. And this is really the registrant's responsibility to do that. And they are. So every maker of these products has some form of training that they are putting out. And I've heard from a grower or two already that they recently attended their training. So that's at least what's happening in Missouri. Of course, every state's free to do whatever they want. I think some still are doing training, but many have kind of backed off of it.
Dr. Lancaster, anything to add with that? Or?
Well, just, yeah, here in Kansas, the university does not provide those training resources. We sure make sure the growers know that they're out there and they're required. But yeah, we're talking about the dicamba systems, but paraquat has some additional training requirements here recently that folks might want to put on their radar if they are planning on using that product as well. Just something else to think about.
Now, for several farmers to look at alternatives from chemical products altogether, there were a couple farmers I had visited with that were using custom designed burners to singe any weed shortly after post-emergence. What can we say, Dr. Bradley, about the effectiveness of such treatments?
Well, I haven't done any burning, but I know that's flamers is what we call it. There's decades old research that some people have done, and I know some more recent research has come out of Nebraska and not too long ago. I don't know of any university that's still doing that kind of stuff, but maybe it just might be that I don't know of. But I think what you're alluding to is basically just that a lot of us have kind of switched our emphasis. I know I have in the past 5 or 6 years, and I think we just need to try to evaluate different things, whether it's robots or electrocutions or seed destruction devices on combines or whatever it is. Personally, my history with water hemp would just say to any rational human being that we're not going to be able to just keep on relying on herbicides to solve everything as the one big hammer. I think somebody put it in an article I read not too many years ago. We need many little hammers, not just one big one. And we've been relying on one big one for a long time. And this thing with the glyphosate and Palmer Amaranth is just another warning, I think, to us of something else that we might lose. So most of our recent focus, other than off-target movement research, has been alternative methods of weed control, put it that way. Some people think I'm crazy, but they're pretty alternative.
And I'd like to go ahead and explore those, a couple of those briefly, because I believe you had brought in a seed crusher from Australia recently to put that to the test.
Yeah, so we have 2 years of data that we're summarizing now and trying to publish and all of that. We've got plenty out there on what we found so far on our website and everything, and I do get asked to talk about that every now and then. We have one that's called a seed terminator. There are 3 or 4 different commercially available seed destruction devices. I don't know what else to call them. Probably one of the more popular ones that you're going to hear about, because I know about 4 university weed scientists that just got them and started using them last year. There's a implement called ReadyCop, and they, I think, got a grant, and you're probably going to start hearing, I know, Iowa State, Arkansas, I think Virginia Tech, and I'm not sure who else. But anyway, there's those. But the one company we worked with was was Seed Terminator, and we see a lot of promise. I mean, it's not a silver bullet. We have shown that you still have some weed seed loss that occurs. Some of it is just simply we never get it into the combine, and I think there's something we can do about that. Maybe if we get some engineers or something involved. The whole premise is there's seed out there when you're harvesting. Most of it runs through the combine, and our data backs that up. Most of it does run through the combine. And so if we can have something on there that destroys it, which is what all of these do, they're roller mills or hammer mills, whatever you want to call them, and they're spinning at about 2,500 RPM or something like that, and they're crushing up weed seed. And so everything that comes out of the back, or a large percentage of what comes out of the back, is now no longer viable. That's the whole concept, and basically our results have bore that out, although we have identified 2 or 3 things that maybe we need to tweak to make it even better, or hopefully make it better. So, we're, like I said, we just have one, and we've been fortunate to work with Case IH and Seed Terminator the past 2 years to do that research. But I think you're going to start seeing a whole lot more about these in the U.S. They have not been as popular for us as what, there's hundreds of them running on commercial farmer combines in Australia, right now. So we can't say that yet in the U.S. and hopefully we'll see a little more movement into that space in the future.
Dr. Lancaster, what are you hearing from your growers in Kansas as to looking to alternatives to using chemical-based weed management techniques? Is there any interest, any promise that some of this research could be applied in the sunflower state?
Absolutely. We're actually partnering with Kevin and his crew on some projects this summer. And as far as grower interest here, I would say it's so much so that we actually have a farmer who is developing his own sort of rescue, non-chemical rescue treatment that we're going to put side by side with the Seed Terminator and some other things that Kevin is going to be looking at. But the interest is definitely there. I think, if I may, the other thing I was kind of thinking while Kevin was talking is that just like we talked about the post-emergence herbicides not being a big hammer or the big hammer, any of these at harvest or non-chemical methods, they're not a big hammer either. We really do have to think about how they fit in together and how they work together. So you have your harvest weed control methods, reducing the seed bank, so you have fewer seeds to try to control with your post-emergent product in the subsequent year. I think that's really important as we talk about some of these non-chemical methods, to recognize that we're not developing a silver bullet. We're developing what I've heard some folks call silver buckshot.
Now we're needing to wrap up the panel here in just a few minutes, so we'll ask a couple closing questions. Starting with you, Dr. Lancaster, is there any new research that you and your fellow agronomists will be undertaking this season with respect to weed management?
I've got a PhD student who is going to dig in deep into some of the things related to pre-emergent herbicides and their efficacy. As weed scientists, we've really been talking a lot about the role of pre-emergent herbicides. I get lots of questions about which one do I use when. And so, we're digging in to try to develop some data for Kansans that will help to answer some of those questions and look at how they fit into the larger system here in Kansas.
Dr. Bradley, how about you? I think we talked about a project or two that might be happening this spring. Anything additional that you'll be working on this spring?
Yeah, I mean, more off-target work, and I think we still need some of that, although less, but more off-target work. And then we have a project on weed electrocution, and I'm actually supposed to get on a call with all of these cooperators this week in Australia and here and all of that. While we've looked at the combine from soybean standpoint, we've never done anything in wheat or corn. And so I hope we can. I don't know yet, but we need to look at what could be done there with that.
And as farmers prepare for, planting, what would, I guess we'll give you one last opportunity to give them any reminders or pointers about how they can best guard their fields against invasive weeds. Well,
just, by never seeing them if you can help it. I mean, you can't let these things go to seed. Over the years, whenever we see something kind of new crop up, it's often because a farmer just was okay with not knowing what that species was. So that's one thing I would say. And then just as far as just overall thoughts about moving into the year, I'd say the same thing I've been saying for many years. You got to talk to your neighbors about what they're planting and what you're planning on planting, so things don't turn bad. And I think those discussions have worked in recent years.
Dr. Lancaster, how about you? Any pointers, any reminders you'd like to pass along to farmers as we wrap up our panel today?
Yeah, along the lines of important conversations to have, I have some concerns for my growers because Kansas was like 98% extend last year. I don't think we're going to be that high this year, but we'll still see a lot of dicamba-resistant soybeans in Kansas. And one of the things that has me concerned is that some of those soybeans will be Roundup Ready Extend, and some of them will be Extend Flex. And I just have been kind of reminding folks that, keeping good records and having good communication with your custom applicators or your spray operator about what's where in that situation, because that's something that could be really easy to get mixed up and have negative results real fast. So just good record keeping and good communication.
And that will do it for our panel discussion on herbicides and weed management today. We thank our panelists, Dr. Sarah Lancaster from Kansas State University and Dr. Kevin Bradley from the University of Missouri. We also thank all the producers who are viewing this panel and hope that we've provided a new idea or two for the season ahead. The Alpha Ag Network, along with our sponsors, are proud to bring you this Ag Summit. A special thanks to our presenting sponsor, Hitchpin. This panel in particular has been sponsored by Stein Seed, Stein Has Yield, and Glacial Lake Organics, Organic Carbon, Weed Redefined. Once again, the views and opinions expressed on today's panels are not those of Alpha Media and do not represent the viewpoints of the Alpha Ag Network stations, their farm directors, or management. This broadcast is protected by copyright law, and credit should be given whenever sharing or reposting this video. Alpha Ag Network is local farm programming, promoting, respecting, and celebrating the industry that drives our community's agriculture. Our producer today has been Dan Waddick. I'm Kyle Hill. Thank you for watching this portion of the Alpha Ag Summit.